Hi, I'm Claudia St. I'm the president of Affinity HR Group. We are your HR partner and resource. The CDC has recently updated the guidelines that they're putting out for employers on when to allow employees to return to work. They are quite different than the previous guidelines that were put out. So as a reminder of what those were, previously, the CDC had said if an employee was sick with COVID, they should not return to work until 7 days past onset of symptoms, 72 hours without a fever, without the use of a fever reducer, and improved respiratory health. If the employee had tested positive for COVID, they would have to satisfy all three of those: 7 days from onset, 72 hours without a fever, improved respiratory health, and they had to test negative for COVID on 2 consecutive tests taken no less than 24 hours apart. We're doing away with those guidelines now, and now they're using something that's really symptoms or severity based. So if you have an employee who has mild to moderate symptoms, or if they tested positive for COVID and are asymptomatic, no symptoms at all, they need to wait 10 days from the onset of symptoms or from the positive test. If they are mild to moderately symptomatic, they also have to wait just 24 hours without a fever, without the use of a fever reducer. And now they have to have improved symptoms, whatever those symptoms may be. So if it wasn't that they had a fever, but it was some other symptom, they have to have improved symptoms as well. If an employee has a severe case of COVID, whether they tested or not tested, if they have a severe state of COVID, they should wait 20 days from the onset of symptoms or the positive COVID test and have 24 hours without a fever or the use of a fever reducer and improved symptoms, whatever those symptoms may be. What they're doing away with is requiring that negative COVID test at the conclusion of that 10 or 20 day period if the employee is improved in their health condition. The only time the CDC is now recommending that they have a negative test at the end or the conclusion of their illness is if they have an underlying healthcare condition, and so they should be in close contact with their healthcare provider to determine whether or not they would require a negative test at the end. So that's what's changed. What hasn't changed, however, is if an employee was exposed to COVID, or if you have an employee that goes to a state or locale where there is a high rate of COVID infection, those employees still have to quarantine for 14 days. So there is a case where you could have an employee who actually gets COVID or tests positive for COVID and can return to work after 10 days and still have an employee who simply was exposed to COVID and is out for a full 14 days. Seems a little confusing to me, and actually the CDC says, we know this sounds pretty confusing, but it relates to when you have an onset of the virus and how long the virus sheds its virulence and is infectious. So those are the updated guidelines. Please know that at Affinity HR Group, we are taking many calls a day now in dealing with COVID infections. We have a COVID hour, which is a prepaid hour that's discounted that you can take in small increments so that we can help you with the multitude of questions and answers that you have to come up with each and every time you face either an exposure or an infection. We're here to help, to do anything that we can to support you during this time. A lot of other things are changing, so we're going to be following up with more information both on our LinkedIn site, our YouTube site, and also in our HR Minutes and articles. So check out our blog, check out our site. And in the meantime, please stay safe and know that we're here for you, and we hope you have a safe and productive work week. Take care.